stared at the check in my hands, the number printed in stark black ink, $45,000. It was more than just money. It was vindication against the man who had laughed in my face and called me sweetheart one too many times. But to understand how I got this check, we have to go back to the beginning. My life runs on a full tank of gas and a tight schedule. I'm a pediatric physical therapist, but my office is the entire Tri-County area. My patients are kids with developmental delays or recovering from serious injuries, and most of them live out in the rural pockets of the state, miles from the nearest proper clinic. So, I go to them. My trunk is a mobile therapy gym filled with colorful therapy balls, balance beams, weighted blankets, and specialized toys. My beat-up 10-year-old sedan was more than just a car. It was my partner. It had over 200,000 miles on it. The seats were permanently dusted with the fine grit of country roads, and it smelled faintly of antiseptic wipes and graham crackers. I loved my job. There's no feeling in the world like seeing a little boy take his first unassisted steps across his living room floor, or helping a girl who survived a car crash finally regain the strength to hold a crayon. These small victories were my fuel. But my car was running on fumes, literally and figuratively. The check engine light had become a permanent dashboard feature, and the rattling sound from under the hood was starting to sound less like a quirk and more like a death knell. I'd be driving down some winding back road, miles from the nearest cell tower, just praying the car wouldn't give up the ghost, leaving me and a car full of therapeutic equipment stranded. The stress was becoming unbearable. After months of scrimping, saving every extra dollar, and taking on extra weekend clients, I finally had enough for a significant down payment. I wasn't looking for a flashy sports car. I needed a fortress, a reliable, certified pre-owned SUV with all-wheel drive and enough cargo space for my gear. I spent weeks researching, comparing models, and reading reviews. I knew what I wanted, I knew the specs, and I knew what a fair price was. I was prepared. Or so I thought. That's how I ended up at Sunshine Motors, a sprawling lot on the edge of town with giant inflatable tube men dancing in the wind. It had a slightly desperate, overly cheerful vibe that should have been my first warning. The second warning was the man who came striding out of the glass-fronted office the moment my boots hit the gravel. "Well, hello there! Looking for a new set of wheels to match that sunny smile?" He boomed. He was a cliché in a cheap suit, slicked back, greasy hair, a tie that was just a little too loud, and a smile full of teeth that were a little too white. A plastic name tag read Sal. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my guard up. "I'm interested in the 4-year-old graphite-colored Highlander you have listed online." "Ah, a woman who knows what she wants. I love it," he said, clapping his hands together. He led me toward the vehicle, which was gleaming under the afternoon sun. It looked perfect. "She's a real beaut, isn't she? One owner, low miles. The lady who had it before you just used it for grocery runs, barely broken in." I circled the vehicle, running my hand along the cool metal. I opened the doors, checked the interior, and then popped the hood. I'm no master mechanic, but my dad had taught me the basics. The Carfax report mentioned it was in a minor front-end collision about a year ago. I stated, peering at the engine. Was the radiator or the frame inspected for damage after the repair? Sal's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He let out a little chuckle and gently closed the hood, giving it a paternal pat. "Now, don't you worry your pretty little head about all that technical stuff. Our master technicians go over these things with a fine-tooth comb. It's certified. That's the magic word. Means it's perfect. Let's talk about the important things, like this panoramic sunroof. Imagine driving out to see your clients, was it? With all that natural light pouring in, you'd be the talk of the town." He gestured for me to get in the driver's seat, his hand hovering a little too close to the small of my back. I bristled but complied, sliding onto the plush leather. The "don't you worry your pretty little head" line echoed in my ears. It was the same condescending tone I'd heard 1,000 times before. But the car, It felt so solid, so safe. The new car smell was intoxicating, a promise of reliability and an end to my constant roadside anxiety. "I'm telling you, Han, this is the one," Sal said, leaning against the open door, his cologne invading my space. "I've got 2 other families coming to look at it this afternoon. A deal this good won't last. For you, I can even knock a couple $100 off the sticker price, but you gotta say yes right now." Every instinct screamed at me to walk away. The dismissiveness, the high-pressure tactics, the oily charm, it was all a massive red flag. But I pictured my patients. I pictured 7-year-old Maya, who lived 40 minutes down a dirt road and was so close to walking. I couldn't risk missing her appointments because my old car finally died. My need overrode my intuition. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Okay, let's do it." Sal's grin widened into a triumphant smirk. "Excellent choice. You won't regret it," he promised. It was a promise he would break before I even made my first payment. The promise didn't even last 2 weeks. I was on my way to Maya's house, humming along to the radio, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The Highlander handled the rutted dirt road with a quiet competence my old sedan could only have dreamed of. For the first time, I wasn't white-knuckling the steering wheel, listening for a death rattle. I was just a therapist on her way to help a child. Then a violent shudder ran through the frame. The engine, which had been purring like a happy cat, coughed, sputtered, and died with a sickening metal-on-metal scream. I coasted to a stop in a cloud of dust and acrid white smoke. Stranded. Again. Only this time, I was stranded in a $40,000 lawn ornament. It took 3 hours to get a tow truck. By the time my beautiful, certified, barely broken-in SUV was deposited back on the gravel lot of Sunshine Motors, the sun was setting and my blood was boiling. I stormed into the office, clutching the thick folder of paperwork that had promised me peace of mind. I found Sal in his glass-walled office, feet up on his desk, laughing on the phone. The salesman persona had been shed. He waved a dismissive hand at me, indicating he'd be a minute. I didn't wait. I walked in and placed the folder on his desk with a firm thud. He ended his call, his face pinched with annoyance. "Can I help you?" The booming, friendly voice was gone, replaced by a flat, bored tone. "My car broke down," I said, my voice tight. "The engine seized. It's outside. I need you to honor the warranty." Sal leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers, looking at me like I was a bug. "All right, sweetheart, let's not get hysterical. The boys in the shop will take a look at it in the morning." It took them 2 days. 2 days of me canceling on my patients, losing income, and borrowing my neighbor's car just to get groceries. When Sal finally called, his voice had a smug, clinical edge. "Our mechanic determined the engine failure was due to overheating. That's considered driver negligence. The warranty is void." "What?" I practically screamed into the phone. "That's impossible. The temperature gauge never moved. The warning lights never came on. This has to be related to the front-end collision I asked you about, the one you told me not to worry my pretty little head about." "Look, I don't know what to tell you. The contract you signed is clear. We're not liable for this," he said. "We can quote you a price for an engine replacement if you want. It'll be about $9 grand. $9,000 on top of the $40,000 loan I'd just taken out. I felt the floor drop out from under me. "No," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "No, you're not getting another dime from me. You sold me a defective vehicle under false pretenses. I want you to cancel the sale and give me my $8,000 down payment back. I'm returning the car." Sal was silent for a moment, and then he laughed. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a deep, ugly, mocking laugh. "That's not how this works. All sales are final. You drove it off the lot. It's your problem now." The next day, I was back in his office, my face pale and my hands trembling. I had spent the night staring at my bank account, at the gaping hole where my savings used to be. "Please," I begged, the fight draining out of me. "I need that money. I need a working car for my job. I help children. I can't do that without a car. I deserve to have the car I was promised, or I deserve my money back. Sal stood up and leaned over his desk, his cheap cologne washing over me again. This time it smelled like pure malice. Deserve? He sneered, his smile a razor slash. Honey, let me tell you something about what you deserve. You came in here acting like you knew everything, asking all your little technical questions. You should have just trusted the man to handle it. But you couldn't, could you? You think you're so smart, but you signed the papers. He pointed a thick finger at me. You wanted this car so bad you were practically vibrating. I saw you. You were desperate, and desperation is a funny thing. It makes you stupid. His voice dropped to a low, venomous whisper. You don't deserve it. You don't deserve a thing. The words hit me harder than a physical slap. The sheer, unvarnished cruelty of it stole my breath. It's a moment I'll never forget. If you're new here, by the way, make sure you subscribe, because you'll want to see how this ends. I stumbled out of his office, blinded by tears of fury and humiliation. There it was, my fortress, my promise of reliability, a dead, graphite-colored monument to my own desperation, sitting on a lot owned by a man who had not only taken my money, but had taken pleasure in telling me I was worthless. I was broke, carless, and trapped in a loan for a machine that would never run again. And Sal? Sal was probably already on the phone, reeling in his next victim. I didn't go back for 3 days. 3 days of stewing in a toxic cocktail of fury, shame, and sheer, paralyzing panic. The first day, I just cried. The second, I spent hours online, burrowing into a rabbit hole of consumer protection laws, warranty statutes, and the fine print of the dealership's own certified program. The third day, I put on my most professional set of clothes, the ones I usually reserve for consulting with doctors, and drove my neighbor's sputtering Civic back to Sunshine Motors. I was done begging. I was done being hysterical. I was going to be logical. I was going to be reasonable. I walked into Sal's office without knocking and sat down opposite him. I placed a neatly organized folder on his desk, between his coffee mug and a pile of contracts. He looked up, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face before it settled into that familiar predatory smirk. Well, look what the cat dragged in, he said, leaning back. Come back to admire your new lawn ornament? I'm here to propose a mutually beneficial solution, I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. I refused to let him see me tremble. I've reviewed the state's consumer protection laws. Given the vehicle's immediate and catastrophic failure, which I believe was due to a pre-existing condition you failed to disclose, I have a strong case for misrepresentation. The certified status implies a level of inspection and reliability that the vehicle clearly did not possess. I opened the folder. I've printed out the relevant statutes. I've also highlighted the section of your own warranty that guarantees the engine and powertrain for 90 days. Your mechanic's claim of driver negligence is baseless. There were no warning lights and no indication of overheating. A third-party diagnostic will prove that. I slid a single piece of paper across the desk. It was a simple, typed agreement. This is a rescission of contract. You take back the Highlander. You return my $8,000 down payment, and we both walk away. No lawyers, no official complaints to the Attorney General, no negative reviews detailing my experience plastered all over the internet. You get to resell the car, after you properly fix it, of course, and I get to not be financially ruined. It's clean, it's simple, it's the right thing to do. I sat back, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my expression was a mask of calm professionalism. I had made my reasonable ask. I appealed to the law, to his business sense, to his desire to avoid a bigger problem. Sal picked up the paper, holding it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a dirty tissue. He scanned it for a few seconds, his smirk widening. Then he started to chuckle. It was a low rumble at first, building until he threw his head back and let out a loud, braying laugh that filled the small office. He laughed so hard he had to wipe a tear from the corner of his eye. "Oh, honey, that's adorable," he finally gasped, tossing the paper back onto the desk. It fluttered down like a dead leaf. "You went home and did your homework. You think you're a little paralegal now? You think you've got me cornered with your Google Law degree?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping the mock jovial tone and turning sharp as broken glass. "Let me tell you how this really works. You signed an as-is agreement. It's in the fine print. That little piece of paper trumps everything else. The certified sticker on the window, that's marketing. It's a feeling. It's not a legally binding contract. The warranty? It's got more holes than a block of Swiss cheese. And okay, overheating is the biggest one. You can't prove the light wasn't on. It's your word against my mechanics. And who do you think the finance company is gonna believe?" He jabbed a finger toward the folder. "You can take this, and you can take your little threats, and you can get the hell out of my office. You bought a car, it's your problem. End of story." The cold finality in his voice was absolute. There was no negotiation left. There was no appeal to be made. I had played my last card, and he had laughed as he burned it in front of my face. I stood up, my legs feeling like hollow reeds. I didn't bother taking my folder. I walked out of the office, past the rows of gleaming, silent cars, and got into my neighbor's rattling Civic. I sat there for a long time, the key in the ignition, unable to turn it. This was it, the low point. The floor hadn't just dropped out from under me. I had fallen through it and was still falling. Every rational, adult step I had taken had led me to this exact moment of complete and utter powerlessness. I had saved my money. I had done my research. I had tried to be reasonable, and I had been swatted away like a fly. He was right. I was desperate. My desperation for a safe car, for the ability to do my job to help those kids, had been a scent in the water, and he was the shark. He had smelled it, and he had feasted on it. Now I was left bleeding out. My savings were gone. My credit was tied to a $40,000 paperweight. I couldn't do my job. Maya was waiting for me. Little Leo, who was just starting to pull himself up to stand, was waiting. How could I tell their parents I couldn't come because my brand new, reliable car was a dead husk on a swindler's lot? The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. I was a fool, a desperate, stupid fool, and I had been crushed. For a long time, I just sat there in my neighbor's car, the engine idling with a rough, uneven tremor that vibrated through the seat. It felt like a parody of my old sedan. I had traded one dying car for another, except this one was a ghost that had cost me my life savings and my credit. The giant inflatable tube men at the entrance to Sunshine Motors whipped and danced in the wind, their plastic smiles mocking me. Desperate. Stupid. Sal's words were on a loop in my head, each repetition chipping away at what little self-respect I had left. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the turns I took or the traffic lights I stopped at. All I could see was his laughing face, his utter contempt. I walked into my small apartment, and the silence was deafening. There were no therapy reports to write, no patient schedules to confirm for the next day. There was nothing. I was untethered. I sank onto my couch, the weight of it all finally crushing me. He had won. He had taken everything, and then, for good measure, he had spit on me. The tears of humiliation I'd shed in his office had dried up, replaced by something cold and hard that was lodging itself in my chest. Shame was a heavy blanket, but underneath it, a different fire was starting to smolder. It wasn't the hot, explosive rage of my first confrontation. It was a low, controlled burn. "You think you're so smart," he'd sneered, "but you signed the papers?" He was right. I had signed the papers, so I decided I would read them again. Not like a victim, but like a hunter. I spent the rest of the night and all of the next day at my kitchen table, surrounded by the mountain of paperwork from the sale, my laptop glowing beside it. I wasn't just looking at the contract anymore. I was cross-referencing everything. The as-is rider he'd been so proud of, the certified pre-owned window sticker I had saved, the dealership's online advertising, and the state's Department of Motor Vehicles website. I ignored the pages about consumer rights and focused on dealer obligations. I typed in every combination of words I could think of: used car fraud, undisclosed collision damage, certified warranty void. It was a slog through dense legalese and angry forum posts from other people who had been burned. For hours, I found nothing but confirmation of what Sal had told me, that As Is was a fortress for shady dealers. Then, late into the second night, fueled by stale coffee and pure spite, I found it. It was buried deep in the state's statutes, a section I had previously skimmed over because I thought it only applied to new cars. It was colloquially known as the Used Car Lemon Law. My breath caught. I clicked the link, and the text of the law filled my screen. I read it once, then twice, my eyes flying across the words. It wasn't a feeling. Like Sal's marketing, it was a weapon, forged in legislative steel. The law was beautifully, brutally specific. It stated that if a used car purchased from a dealer suffers a substantial defect within a specific time frame or mileage limit after purchase, the dealer is required to repair it. The car was a 4-year-old model with 60,000 miles. It fell well within the statute's protection for vehicles under 5 years old and with less than 100,000 miles. The defect had to substantially impair the use, value, or safety of the vehicle. A seized engine was the very definition of that. And then I saw the part that made my heart leap, the part that was Sal's undoing. The law stipulated that if the dealer is unable to repair the same substantial defect after a reasonable number of attempts, the buyer is entitled to a full refund, including the down payment. But a subclause clarified the definition of reasonable number of attempts. It read, "The reasonable attempt to repair is considered to have been met if the dealer refuses to undertake the repair of the defect within the warranty period." He hadn't just failed to fix it. He had refused. He had laughed at me. He'd voided the warranty based on a lie and told me it was my problem. He thought his as-is clause was a shield, but the law was clear. A state statute like this superseded any dealership contract. He hadn't just been cruel, he had been stupid. He had, in his arrogance, handed me the exact tool I needed to bring his whole smug world crashing down. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a predator gets when it finally corners its prey. I wasn't a paralegal with a Google Law degree. I was something far more dangerous to a man like Sal. I was a wronged woman with a folder full of evidence, a clear-cut legal violation, and absolutely nothing left to lose. I pulled a fresh piece of paper from my printer and began to type. It wasn't a request. It was a formal notice, the first step in a bureaucratic war he had no idea was coming. The formal notice I drafted wasn't born from the frantic energy of my earlier research. It was crafted with the slow, deliberate precision of a bomb maker. I cited the exact statute, Title 59, Chapter 17, Section 1163 of the State Code. I detailed the date of purchase, the VIN, the date of the catastrophic engine failure, and the date of Sal's official refusal to repair the vehicle under warranty. I attached copies of the bill of sale, the certified sticker, my down payment check, and the tow receipt. It was a sterile, factual account of his crime. I printed 2 copies, one for my records, and one that I sent to the official address for Sunshine Motors via certified mail, with return receipt requested. A paper trail was the first thread of my web. The next step was harder. It required me to swallow every last shard of my pride and play the part he'd already cast for me, the defeated woman. I took a deep breath, let my shoulders slump, and dialed the dealership. "Sunshine Motors, this is Sal," he answered, his voice already bored. "Sal, it's me," I said, pitching my voice to sound weary, resigned, "the owner of the Graphite Highlander." There was a pause, and I could practically hear the smirk forming on his face. Well, to what do I owe the pleasure? Decided you want us to quote you for that new engine after all? "No," I said softly. "No, I can't afford that. You were right. It's my problem now." This was the hardest sentence I had ever forced myself to say. The words felt like ash in my mouth. "The car is my property, but it's sitting on your lot. I need to arrange to have it towed somewhere else. I just wanted to make sure that was okay." The satisfaction in his voice was a physical thing. I felt it like a wave of heat through the phone. Finally came to your senses, sweetheart. See? Wasn't so hard to just accept the way things are, was it? Yeah, you can have it towed. Just make sure they come during business hours. And tell your guy not to scratch any of my actual inventory on his way out. He let out a short, sharp laugh. Wouldn't want him to damage a car that actually runs. This was it, the final gloat, the last twist of the knife. He thought he was kicking me when I was down, but all he was doing was stepping deeper into the trap I was laying. The cold, controlled fire in my chest burned a little brighter. I didn't rise to the bait. I didn't scream or cry. I gave him nothing. I understand, I said, my voice a perfect imitation of hollow defeat. Thank you, Sal. I hung up before he could say another word. For a moment, I just sat there, my knuckles white on the receiver. Then a slow, tight smile stretched my lips. It was a grim, unfamiliar expression in the reflection of my dark phone screen. He thought the story was over. He didn't know I was just starting a new chapter. I pulled out the second document I had prepared, a meticulously organized binder. It was a copy of everything I'd sent via certified mail, plus a detailed, chronological log of every conversation we'd had, complete with his most charming quotes. Don't you worry your pretty little head. Desperation makes you stupid. It's your problem now. With the binder open in front of me, I dialed the number I had found on the Attorney General's website, the one for the Consumer Protection Division's Lemon Law Arbitration Unit. A calm, professional voice answered, "Consumer Protection, this is Margaret speaking. How can I help you?" The shift in my own voice was instantaneous. The weak, broken woman who had just spoken to Sal was gone, replaced by the competent, efficient therapist I was with my patients, families. "Hello, Margaret. I'm calling to file a formal complaint under the Used Car Lemon Law, Statute 59171163. I have a vehicle that suffered a substantial, non-repairable defect within 2 weeks of purchase from a licensed dealer." There was a soft clicking of a keyboard on the other end. "Okay, do you have the vehicle's information and the dealership's name and address?" "I do," I said. I read off the Highlander's VIN, the name Sunshine Motors, and its official business address. I explained the timeline, the certified status, the seized engine, and Sal's explicit refusal to perform repairs. I spoke calmly, using the language of the statute itself: substantial impairment of use and value, refusal to undertake repair, reasonable attempt to repair clause. Margaret was silent for a moment after I finished. "You've certainly done your homework," she said, a note of respect in her voice. "Based on what you've told me, you have a very clear-cut case. His refusal to even look at it is a direct violation. The as-is clause he's hiding behind is irrelevant when a state statute like this applies." Relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. "So what happens now?" "I'm opening a case file for you right now," she explained. "We will send a formal notice to the dealer, informing them they are in violation and that a state-run arbitration hearing has been scheduled. They have 2 options. They can settle with you beforehand for the full relief stipulated by the law, which would be a full refund of the purchase price and all associated fees, or they can argue their case before the state arbitrator. Given the evidence you've described, I would not advise them to choose the latter." I looked at my binder, at the neat tabs and highlighted passages. My arsenal. I'm ready for arbitration if it comes to that. "I have a feeling it won't," Margaret said kindly. "You'll receive your official case number via email within the hour. Just sit tight, we'll take it from here." I hung up the phone and stared out the window. The world looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. The power had shifted. It was no longer my word against his, it was the word of a swindler against the full bureaucratic weight of the state. And I had just dropped that weight directly on his head. The return receipt for my certified letter came back signed with an illegible scrawl that I knew was his. I imagined him tearing it open, glancing at the statute number and tossing it in the trash with another braying laugh. It didn't matter. It was proof of delivery. The first pin in the grenade. The second pin was pulled by Margaret from the Consumer Protection Division a week later. "He's been unresponsive," she said over the phone, and I could hear the practiced understatement in her voice. "Mr. Salvi, is that his name? He told our representative that it was a customer service issue that had already been resolved, and then hung up." A cold smile touched my lips. "That sounds like him." "It does," Margaret agreed, "which is why we're moving to the next step. We're sending a field investigator to the premises to assess the vehicle and deliver the arbitration summons in person. His name is Mr. Evans. He'd like you to be on site, just in case Mr. Salvi tries to deny you or the vehicle exists. You don't have to engage, just be present." "I'll be there," I said, my voice steady. The day of judgment had arrived. I parked my neighbor's Civic across the 4-lane road from Sunshine Motors in the lot of a shuttered diner. From here, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the glass-fronted office where Sal held court. I saw him inside, leaning back in his chair, feet on his desk, a phone cradled against his ear, the king in his castle of glass and gravel. The giant inflatable tube men danced their manic, endless jig. For 10 minutes, I just sat and watched, my heart a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. Then a nondescript beige sedan, the kind of car that blends into any parking lot, pulled into the dealership. A man in a forgettable gray suit got out. He wasn't a cop or a lawyer. He was something far more terrifying to a man like Sal. He was a bureaucrat. He carried a slim briefcase in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "Mr. Evans." He walked past the gleaming rows of inventory and straight into the office. I saw Sal wave him off with one hand, annoyed at the interruption. Mr. Evans didn't leave. He placed the clipboard on the desk. Through the glass, I saw Sal's posture change. His feet came off the desk. He sat up, leaning forward, his annoyance curdling into confusion. Mr. Evans said something, then pointed out the window toward the back of the lot, where my dead Highlander sat gathering dust. Sal's face contorted. I saw him jab a finger at the clipboard, then at Mr. Evans. The slick, charming salesman was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. His hands were moving, chopping the air. He was yelling, I could tell by the way the veins stood out on his neck. Mr. Evans, however, was a statue of bureaucratic calm. He just stood there, letting Sal exhaust himself. He made a small note on his clipboard. Then Sal saw me. His tirade stopped mid-syllable. His eyes locked on the Civic across the street, and then on me behind the wheel. The confusion and rage on his face dissolved in an instant, replaced by something else. Dawning, sickening comprehension. He finally understood. This wasn't a random audit. This wasn't a clerical error. This was me, the hysterical woman, the desperate, stupid fool he'd swindled and mocked. I hadn't just gone away. I had gone to a higher power. He burst out of the office, his cheap suit jacket flapping behind him, and stormed into the middle of his lot. He pointed a trembling finger at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound reached me across the roar of traffic. Mr. Evans followed him out calmly, a silent shadow of consequence. I started the Civic and pulled out into the road, making a U-turn and driving directly into the Sunshine Motors lot. I parked a few feet from where Sal was standing, his face now a mask of pure panic. I got out of the car, my binder, my beautiful, perfect binder, tucked under my arm. "You!" he finally choked out, his voice a raw, ugly rasp. "You did this! What the hell is this?" "This is a state-run arbitration summons, Mr. Salvi," Mr. Evans said, his voice quiet but carrying the immense weight of the government. "As I explained, you are in direct violation of Title 59, Section 1163. Your refusal to repair the vehicle constitutes a failure to meet the terms of the law." "I'll see you in court," Sal shrieked at me, ignoring the investigator. "I'll sue you for harassment." "There will be no court," Mr. Evans said flatly. "This is binding arbitration. Your options are to provide the complainant with a full refund of the purchase price including her down payment and all associated fees and taxes. Or you can present your case to the state arbitrator in 30 days. However, he paused, glancing at his notes. Given the evidence, I should inform you that if the arbitrator rules against you, they can also award punitive damages and compensation for the complainant's lost income. It could be considerably more expensive for you. Sal's eyes darted from the calm investigator to me. He looked at the binder under my arm, the arsenal I had so carefully prepared. He saw the woman he had dismissed, the woman he had called stupid, and in that moment, he knew he had no case. He had no lies left. He was utterly, completely ruined. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty gray pallor. His shoulders slumped. The swagger, the malice, the triumphant smirk, it all evaporated under the harsh afternoon sun. He looked small, defeated. "You don't deserve it," he had sneered at me in this very spot. I met his gaze, my expression unreadable. I didn't need to say a word. The state of Massachusetts was saying it all for me. I had won. And that $45,000 check? It was already as good as in my hand. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, broken only by the roar of a passing semi and the faint, cheerful music still leaking from Sal's office. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, the gears of his tiny, cruel mind grinding to a halt as they processed the scene. The bureaucrat. The binder. The woman he'd broken, now standing on his lot holding the detonator. "Get off my property," he finally rasped, but the words had no force. They were the reflexive twitch of a dying animal. Mr. Evans made a note on his clipboard. "The complainant has a right to be here, Mr. Salvi, as does the vehicle in question, which is material evidence." Sal's eyes darted back to me, and the last of his bluster crumbled into a pathetic, pleading heap. Okay, wait," he said, taking a half step toward me, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Can he give us a minute, please? Let's just talk, you and me. We can fix this." The begging had begun. It was as weak and cloying as his cologne. I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to Mr. Evans. "I'll be fine." The investigator gave Sal a look that could have frozen water. "I'll be inspecting the vehicle. I'll be within earshot." He turned and walked with deliberate slowness toward the back of the lot where my dead Highlander sat. The moment Mr. Evans was out of immediate range, Sal's posture changed. He hunched his shoulders, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, I'm sorry, all right? I was having a bad day. You were emotional. Let's not let this get out of hand. I'll fix the car, for real this time. Brand new engine, on the house. We can just forget this whole thing ever happened. Tell your guy to go away." I didn't say a word. I just opened my binder. I flipped past the lemon law statute, past my call logs, past the copy of the summons. I stopped at a new, freshly printed section. The tab read, "Fraudulent Marketing." "We're long past fixing the car, Sal," I said, my voice as cold and flat as the gravel under our feet. "We're at the damages stage now, and the lemon law isn't your only problem." I held the binder so he could see the heading. His eyes widened. "Your Sunshine Certified program," I continued, my tone clinical. "I did some digging. It's a fascinating piece of fiction. It's not registered with the manufacturer. It doesn't adhere to the 172-point inspection it promises on your website. It's just a sticker you print in your office. That's not a customer service issue. That's wire fraud and deceptive advertising. A class action lawsuit waiting to happen. The Attorney General's office tends to take that sort of thing very, very seriously. Much more seriously than one broken down car." He looked as if I had physically struck him. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He knew I was right. He knew I had him. "The state will force you to give me a full refund. That's a foregone conclusion," I said, meeting his terrified gaze. "But I'm feeling reasonable, so here's my one and only offer. You will pay me my settlement in full by tomorrow, and maybe, just maybe, I won't feel obligated to forward my research on your fraudulent business practices to the investigator who is currently inspecting my car. Pay me my settlement and maybe I won't report the second violation." His face was ashen. Settlement? What are you talking about? The law says a refund. The law is the bare minimum. I cut him off, the fire I had banked for so long finally rising in my voice. This is no longer about a refund. This is about compensation. This is your severance package from my life. I flipped to the final page in my binder. It was a simple invoice. You will write me a bank check for $45,000, I stated, the number hanging in the air between us like a guillotine. That covers the full purchase price of the vehicle, my $8,000 down payment, the loan origination fees, the sales tax, the towing fee, and damages for the income I lost while you were laughing at me on the phone. Think of it as the price for making this go away quietly. Because if you don't, I promise you, the state arbitrated damages will be significantly higher, and that will be before they even start the fraud investigation. He stared at the number on the page, then at my face. He was searching for the desperate, stupid woman he had humiliated. She wasn't there. In her place was a stranger with eyes like chips of ice. He saw no weakness, no room for negotiation. He saw only the cold, hard math of his own destruction. You have until noon tomorrow to have the check ready for me at my bank, I said, closing the binder with a definitive snap. Otherwise, I'll let Mr. Evans know he needs to open a second file. The choice is yours. I turned my back on him without another word, got into my neighbor's car and drove away, leaving him standing alone in the middle of his empire of lies, the dancing inflatable men waving a frantic silent goodbye. The next morning, I was at my bank, 15 minutes before noon, my hands resting calmly in my lap. I wasn't nervous. The fight was over. This was just a collection of spoils. At 11:58, Sal walked in. He looked like a deflated balloon. His suit was rumpled, his slicked back hair was disheveled, and the skin around his eyes was puffy and gray. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the teller, mumbled something, and slid a piece of paper under the glass. The teller, a young woman who knew me by name, processed it with professional indifference before calling me over. Here you are, she said, handing me the bank check. I took it. The paper felt heavy, substantial. I stared at the number printed in stark black ink. $45,000. It was more than just money. It was vindication. It was the sound of his laughter turning to ash in his mouth. Sal was already gone, scurrying out of the bank like a roach exposed to the light. I never saw him again. I did, however, see Sunshine Motors one last time. About a month later, I was driving to a new patient's house on the other side of town. A flicker of movement caught my eye, and I glanced over. The giant inflatable tube men were gone. The rows of gleaming cars had vanished. A chain-link fence surrounded the empty lot, and a large for lease sign was staked into the gravel where Sal's office had been. Nailed to the fence was a smaller, official-looking notice from the state's Consumer Protection Agency. Its text too small to read from the road, but its message perfectly clear. He hadn't just lost to me. He had lost to the system he thought he could game. The whole rotten enterprise had collapsed under the weight of its own lies. That $45,000 didn't make me rich, but it gave me back my life. After the original loan was nullified and my down payment was returned as part of the settlement, I was left with a sum that represented more than just a surplus. It was a safety net. It was peace of mind. It was the freedom to make a choice without desperation breathing down my neck. This time, I didn't go to a sprawling lot with dancing tube men. I went to a quiet, reputable dealership with a no-haggle policy. I bought a brand new, dark blue Subaru, a car so sensible it was almost boring. And it is the most beautiful thing I have ever owned. It smells of clean fabric and possibility. The cargo space is perfect, not just for my therapy balls and balance beams, but for the new custom-built sensory table I could finally afford for my kids. Last week, I drove it 40 minutes down that same rutted dirt road to Maya's house. The all-wheel drive handled the bumps with a quiet, unbothered competence. I wasn't white-knuckling the wheel. I wasn't praying. I was just a therapist on her way to help a child. When I got there, Maya's mom met me at the door, her eyes shining. "You have to see this," she whispered. She led me into the living room, and there was Maya, standing in the middle of the floor, unassisted. She took one wobbly step, then another, a huge, triumphant grin spreading across her face. That's the real victory. It's not the check in my hand or the sight of Sal's ruined business. It's this: the ability to show up, to do the work I love without my own life crumbling around me. I was told I was desperate and stupid, that I deserved nothing. But what I learned is that when they try to make you feel small, it's not a sign to give up. It's a sign to get organized. This whole journey started with a condescending salesman and a dead engine, but it ended with me finding a strength I never knew I had. If you want to follow along for more stories about fighting the good fight, you should probably hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next.